have to sand the butt of the stick and make an effort to do however we want to blend the transition from the octagonal to the round. So I'm going to start by taking off my tape. Okay, I'll put my paper towel back on here, keep my sweaty hands off of the stick. And then I use, got just an old ebony block here. I've got, it's one side is flat and the other side has a little bit of a round to it. So we're going to take our block here, wrap the sandpaper on. I take my sheet of sandpaper and cut it in half and in half and in half until I ended up with 16 pieces. So that's the size of this sandpaper. So now I'm going to sand. I want to be really careful not to change the shape of these. I'm just basically polishing them up a little bit. Okay.
If you had any chatter or anything, would you want to try and fix that before you started sanding?
Yeah, you might, I would have done my best to get rid of it before I got to this point, but this is sort of your last chance, obviously, to deal with that, and hopefully you don't have any. You might have a spot like right there where the plane stopped or started, so you got to blend that away. Just a little blip. If you ever get a chance to look at an old Tort that is super fresh, there are not many of them out there, you can actually look down the stick. He did not use sandpaper on his octagonal sticks, at least, and you can actually see the little nicks in the blades of the plane, so they kind of go like this down the octagonal face there, the facets. So it's a really pretty cool thing. So I guess you could assume that he did not sand any of his octagonal sticks except for a little bit at the head. Okay, got that cleaned up. Check and make sure it's all nice and crisp there. Okay, so now I'm going to blend. I'm just going to kind of just sand the corners as I turn this. Kind of blend away the sharp corners of the transition here. Look and see how that looks. Pretty good. And then just and this is sort of a, again, this is one of those salt to taste kind of things. You might have your transition back here in the winding, or you might have it more abrupt than this. This to me just sort of a natural thing. Your whole winding looks the same because it's all octagonal, and then it blends into the stick. Okay, like that. Looks good. It's all the same all the way around. Okay, now we're going to go up to the head here. Sand it. Just nice and tight so we can hang on. So I'm going to start just with my block here. And I'm just going to sand this area right where the back of the head or the chamfer is going to go. On my bows, I have just the slightest curve. I'm not sure how to show it to you. Right here. This is not flat. It has just a little bit of a roll to it. So I'm sanding the side of the head and a little bit up into the stick. Okay, you can sand this. Okay. Now I'm going to take this and fold it into thirds. And when you do that, it holds together really well. So it gives you a little bit more control. My violin making teacher, Chuho Lee, he talked about sandpaper as, think about it as a tool, not, not as, you're not rubbing something, you're cutting something. So now I'm just blending in the rounded portion into the side of the head, going up to the center ridge here. Doing the same on this side now. Getting rid of all my file marks. If you see an old Tour de Picat, often you'll see chatter marks from their knives as they cut into the up to the center line. Okay, so now I'm going to take my sandpaper and I'm going to roll it up, and I just take one of my needle files and roll it around the tang end here.
You're doing this all with one piece of sandpaper?
It's all one piece of sandpaper, yeah. Okay. So now I can use this to just finish this last bit of rounding here. This is one of the tells between a German bow and a French style bow, and that is this little spot right here.
I can't.
The Germans, so right where the ebony and the ivory meet, the Germans would leave a little triangle of Pernambuco here. On both sides it would be even, and the French rounded that off. And so if you want kind of a quick and easy way to kind of tell if a bow is French or if it's German, you can do that. Now the only flaw in that idea is if the tip has been replaced, and often you see the nose has been made way too small, and they've actually filed into the Pernambuco, so that's a shame. Okay, so now what we're going to do, now we're going to finish sanding the top of the head, and we're going to blend the head into the stick. So I'll go back to my 3 folds here. Let's start sanding this. And my sandpaper's not hanging out here, it's staying right here.
So it's directly under your finger.
It's directly under my finger and I'm not cutting at the very end. So getting this nice and rounded here. So now I have this, almost like it's a miter cut right here. You see a ridge. I can darken it up here with a pencil. There's a ridge right there on both sides. So now, when I know I've got this shape the way I want it, do a little bit more right there. Then I can start blending that in. This area here. Sand into. Okay. Oh yeah, one more thing too is I like to leave the thickness of this ivory a little bit more than it will be finished, so that I know that I'm going to get a nice crisp curve off of the top. When I sand it, I haven't accidentally rounded it down. So we'll reshape this later. So now I'm going to go ahead now and deliberately start to knock this corner down. Okay, that looks nice and crisp, like they were, like I intentionally made it that way. Okay. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut my chamfers here. I have this little block that I use. This is my number stamps, so I'm going to use that as a platform. A lot of makers put this down on their thigh and cut it, and for me, just my vision doesn't work very well that way. I've got to have it a little bit closer to my eyes, so I'm going to set it on this and start with my chamfer. And chamfers are another thing. It's a salt to taste kind of thing. You can do really thin chamfers, and you can do thick ones. You can have them change their can change the angle. Mine, I make them narrow at the ivory, and they get thicker as they get up into the head. So this is definitely one of those kind of a signature thing. You can do your, it's like, oh, that bow must be a Rodney Moore. Look at those chamfers. I doubt anybody actually thinks that, but maybe someday. Okay. And this transition from head into the stick can be a little bit scary sometimes, so this side cut pretty easily, but if it starts to chip into the stick, you've got to stop and use a file to do that.
There are certain makers that had specific styles to their chamfers.
Absolutely.
What was the...
Torts were pretty much the same as they went around. Picot had they got really thick right in the middle, and then thinner again as they got into the stick. Sartori start small and get wider as they come around. So again, it's really a Salt to taste here. Okay, you gonna
Crocodile.
you
Come
gonna do
on.
the other side for me, huh?
Nope.
No? Alright. Never mind.
That was pretty.
Crocodile is not into doing chamfers, I can tell you that. And you can look down them this way, see how that line is going. Look this way, see, you know, you might have, you want it to have look nice in every direction you can think of here. So, also sometimes when you're doing your chamfers, it can show you flaws, whether you've got little lumps or bumps in the shape of the back of your head here. I'm going to go ahead and clean this up with a knife. I got a combination of file marks and knife marks, so I'd like to have it one or the other.
Crocodile.
You gonna try, huh?
No, come on.
Okay. Looks pretty good. Okay, and I'll do the other side, and it's a little bit less coordinated. At least feels that way, but it's sort of the rule of thumb for bow makers is the audience side chamfer is always the one you cut the best. Not intentionally, but it just works out that way. And also, it's always the prettier wood. It's on the audience side. Never shows up in the photographs because you're always photographing the other side. So you want to try to have this the same angle as the other side, same width. Cut in the other direction here.
Camera does not like that angle.
This is one of the reasons that I did not file or plane up this high, is because I want to have absolute control of what this finished area is like. And this always looks best if this is done with a knife. It looks like it's just one cut. You don't have to see different angles on it. If you're going to file it for a finish, and that's perfectly fine. You want that one nice crisp line. You don't want it to, you can see different angles as it goes around. Don't sand them. Leave them. We're used to seeing knife marks on the chamfers, so you don't need to sand them. They look great that way.
When you're looking at old bows, you can tell whether they've been sanded or cut.
You can definitely tell if they've been sanded or cut because they just look as soon as you take sandpaper to them, they're rounded. They're not crisp anymore. Okay, so now I'm going to finish this area up. So I'm going to finish blending then this chamfer here, or this corner. Same on this side. Now I'm going to round down on the spot of facet.
Are you leaving an edge at all on that area of the stick?
So on my center, I'm getting rid of the center facet right up almost to where the transition curve is, and so the chamfer, as it goes into the stick, it needs to blend away. If you blend it really short, then it looks like this line goes up, and that looks it's not as aesthetically pleasing. So you want to have it come away from the head, maybe a centimeter or so, and still be fairly crisp. So get rid of all of our file marks here.
Are there any older makers that you could tell used a file on their chamfers?
Yeah, there are for sure. Naming them right off the top of my head, I can't. But I was working on a really nice picat bow, and you could see that he actually banged his plane into his chamfer, so you could see these nicks on the two inside chamfers. So he had done that after he had done the chamfers. So that was kind of an interesting thing there. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to trim down this nose a little bit. I don't do this straight across. I put a little bit of a curve on this.
Why do you put a curve
It just
on
looks better to me if you do that. And you also want, I got to thin down the bottom of it too. I'll do that later. You want the ivory to be a little bit thicker than the bottom. So aesthetically looks better than if it's exactly the same or less. That's really bad. And then of course you want to follow the same angle as the ebony. So you want this to be a nice shape. And then the final shape of the nose is a tombstone shape. So you want that to be symmetrical. Especially if you're going to enter a competition, you want that to look so it's not skewed off to one side or another. So I'll probably trim this down a little bit more later, but I'm just going to take sandpaper and just dull this edge a little bit so it's not so sharp. So the stick is done on this. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take a piece of paper towel and put some alcohol on it and just clean it up here. And this is kind of washing the dust out of the pores.
Why would you want to do that?
Well, sometimes if you've got stuff in the pores, they'll turn black. So you don't want that, obviously. And for me, because I've got moist hands, or the pH of my perspiration is such that I can actually stain bows. You can see my fingerprints on bows sometimes, and I have to sand them off. So I try not to touch it in a place that it's going to get left. So that is it for the stick. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'll take the paper towel here and my blonde wax shellac and thin that out a little bit. And I'm just gonna cover all the surfaces here.
Have you tried other ways of polishing?
Yeah, I've done some things with one of my friends, Joe Robson, makes this linseed oil that's super thick, dries easily in a day. You put it on, and then you rub off as much as you possibly can. So it's just like, you know, like one molecule thick, basically, and that has a nice look to it. It's a bit slower than doing shellac. So what I'll do, you know, over the next hour or so, I will put on, you know, 3, 4, 5 coats of this, and then I'm gonna put this out in the sun all day, and then maybe add a little bit more tomorrow, and back out in the sun, and harden up the shellac, and then Monday morning when we come back, I'm gonna basically sand it all off, and then put one more coat of shellac with a little oil, and this thing will be shiny like it's covered with honey. So it'll look really fabulous, and of course it'll get much darker out in the sunlight as well. So we're done for the day.
We're done for the day?
We're done for the day.
So what are we going to be working on next week?
So Monday we're going to sand down the stick, put some more polish on it, back out in the sunlight if we have. It's going to rain here, so maybe back in the light box, and then we are going to finish the frog. And the frog's going to take about 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours to finish. And then on Tuesday, hopefully, we will do a wrap, a thumb grip, and a rehair. It'll be done. Brand it and put it all together. Monday too, we'll go ahead and we'll finish the mortise before we do anything on the finish, because if the finish is soft, it'll leave marks in there. We don't want to do that for sure. So, all right.
So if people would like to give us suggestions on what kind of videos we could do next, they should send their suggestions to info@learningtradesecrets.com.
That would be great. We're thinking about doing a video on different ways of soldering. We talk about doing a cap button, how to build a cap button. Yeah, anything. Remember to push that like button.
Subscribe.
And subscribe. That helps out a lot. All right. Have a great weekend.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.